All right, so you are going to be so happy you're here for the interview today. It was put together it was put together by Lisa Chan, who is the founder of TrufElle. So for those of you that don't know, TrufElle is this amazing movement that she's had going for about 4 years, and the goal is to ignite sensual, passionate relationships, whether it's with yourself or with your partner. But the most important thing and the special thing about today's interview is that a lot of the foundation for TrufElle has been inspired by the research of Dr. Petra Zebroff, who is here with us today, and we're going to be learning about her newest study, which is actually pretty new to us as well, isn't it? So we're really familiar with her past study, not old, but your other studies, and it's been so fundamental and so important for the women in our group. But I'm going to steal your notes because mine just blew away. But her new study is absolutely fascinating. You're going to love it. You're going to get so much out of it. So, to introduce Dr. Petra, she's dedicated her academic life to the study of sex. She's also a sex therapist of over 20 years and has actually literally helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people. It's either understanding yourself or helping in your relationships. Her study is so powerful. We owe so much to you for so much of how much we've grown in the last 4 years, like really. And her most notable work in research is examining. Are you ready for this? It's examining what turns people on. So do you know what turns you on? We've learned that in the last few years thanks to her research, and you would be fascinated by what turns you on. We're not all built the same, that's for sure. So since our start, conversations at TrufElle have always been fueled by her research. And what's really wonderful about Petra's research is that it's relatable. So it isn't so academic that you can't put your shoes in what's going on. You can actually relate to it and implement it in your life in such practical and beautiful ways. So today we're really, really excited, Petra, to delve into your newest research. And it's the questionnaire for turn-on initiation preference. Do you know what that means? Well, just stay tuned because we're going to find out what that means, and it's actually super exciting. And the other thing I know you're very modest, but I want to congratulate Petra on is that her study was accepted into the Journal of Sex Research. So seriously, Petra, congratulations. I know that's a huge feat. You went like to the creme de la creme to have your research put out there, and it's going to help so many people. I am thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yes, Petra, on behalf of TrufElle, and the tribe, our TrufElle tribe, we have a huge following of women who was so inspired by your study and so lucky to have you here today. So why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit more about what this turn-on initiation preference is?
Well, it's a fancy way of saying what turns you on with a partner. That's what I studied. I studied what everybody has something. Everybody has something that moves them from their everyday brain to their erotic brain. That everyday brain that is working and picking up the kids and doing all of those normal things.
We get it.
And we want to, we spend a lot of time in that brain, and we want sometimes to move into our erotic brain, that warm, sensual, exciting space where everything is responding and our body is lighting up and
it feels so good.
Usually it's when you're on vacation.
Yes, and it's often because people are having trouble moving from their everyday brain into their erotic brain. And so I look at that's something that works for everybody's different. So some people are going to have, it's going to be seeing a sexy body, and for other people it's going to be a hot fantasy. And for other people it's going to be a slow, sensual massage. So we're all different.
Me too.
It's whatever that. Oh, this is important. I want to wait till that goes away.
There's my helicopter. Or the one that's taking us to the island.
It's that something that is like a switch. It's like a switch to our erotic brain. And that's something is the thing that we need to find out for ourselves and for our partners, and that is what this questionnaire does.
I have to say, Petra, that's probably what touched us most. We were in a stage in our lives where our brain was taking over. Our erotic brain had somehow fizzled between family, work, kids.
Yeah.
And so when we met you 5 years ago, and it brought that back into light that there is an erotic brain in there, and then you had all this research, it was really mind-blowing for us.
It was truly mind-blowing. Yes.
So I'm just curious, like, I mean, we got inspired from your research, but I'm wondering what inspired you?
Well, to do this particular research, which is on initiation, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is. But what this came out directly from my clients, and the reason it came out of my clients is because I see initiation problems being such a big problem for so many couples.
Yeah.
They get into a relationship. Initiation tends to be quite easy at the beginning.
For sure.
In the honeymoon phase.
We need sleep.
Yes. It's just, nature is doing it for us. But after that honeymoon phase, it changes. And it's usually it's usually about a year to a year and a half. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer, but
so I didn't do too bad, but but still, it really does do it for us. That's such a good way.
So after a year to year and a half, that's when you actually need to try and work.
There we go. That's exactly right. It is that moment where I tell every couple, you have to talk to your partner. You have to know what works underneath that.
And sometimes we don't realize that it takes work. We think it should be like it was in the initiation stage.
I hear that over and over and over again. And this initiation stage is so important because it is the stage of sex that if it doesn't happen, sex doesn't happen. It is a crucial place, and there's very little research done on this stage of sex. So it came out of a couple that I'm going to talk about because it sort of makes it a little bit more real. I'm going to call them John and Jane.
Okay.
And John and Jane came in and wanted to have, like so many couples, they were around their mid-30s is often where I see people. I'm not sure why.
With kids or no kids?
This couple had kids.
Which the age of the kids.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, when they're needing you and pawing at you all day, and then you need to get pawed.
Yes,
exactly. So this couple came in and they were a lovely couple, and that's the problem because I see all these lovely couples who are really well-meaning. They they're each other's best friends. They do a lot of things very well. But they come in saying, we're stuck at this place where we want to have sex, we want an emotional connection, we're missing sexuality, we want to feel that feeling again.
John and Jane are not unusual.
They're not unusual. I've seen so many people since. They're just the ones that I happened to see at the beginning. And so they came in and I realized often I want to talk about initiation issues because this might resonate for some people in that initiation problems usually manifest themselves in a couple of ways. It's usually these lovely couples trying to get along, but they're often angry with each other. They're angry or they're feeling, there's usually one person who has slightly higher desire than the other.
Yes.
So they feel like they're doing the work around sex. And they come in and they try in a way that maybe not be great sometimes. For example, I have a typical one that I hear a lot is, my partner pokes his erection at me at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that's how you start sex.
Nobody's heard of that one.
I hear it a lot, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
This is what I love about the conversations. You realize that these things are like, they're pretty
You
usual.
realize that you're not that special.
You're not that special.
So I started looking more into this, and this particular couple, that wasn't what was happening. But it's usually one person has higher desire than the other, and they're feeling really sad that they're missing out on sex, and the other person is feeling guilty or pressured. But higher desire partner, we have to keep this in mind. The higher desire partner has an advantage. They're already in their erotic brain.
True.
That's
fair.
Yeah.
Not fair. Yes, they don't have to try as hard.
They're already there, and that's why they're initiating. So the person who's being initiated upon is the one who is still in their everyday brain.
Which I'm guessing a lot of women take on.
A lot of, we do see, there's a stereotype that men have higher desire than women. I
think it's about the initiation and the
women
working
has more
brain.
things going on out
That's
here.
true. There's a lot of people. Now, it also depends, and I'll tell you what the research found around that. So that gets really interesting. It's not always gendered. Sometimes it is. Sometimes we've got a lot of women taking on that everyday brain stuff, and sometimes they can let it go more than the man can. So we don't want to make this gendered.
So, just out of curiosity, are men thinking about buying milk in the morning? I'm
No,
just curious.
It's a good point. But what happens is
Oat
the
milk.
morning erection, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen for women. So women might lubricate, they just don't know they are.
Yeah.
Men sort of get this noticeable thing that says, hey, I'm such
very symbolic.
Though.
Yes,
It's very symbolic.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that what inspired you? Was this couple?
So this couple, they came in, sat down, told me how wonderful their relationship was, how much they loved each other, but you could feel the anger and you could feel the rejection on his part. You could really feel like he was missing out something. And she felt really pressured and felt really guilty that this was happening, but she didn't know what to, neither of them knew what to do. So I asked them a bunch of questions, and we finally got to this was a problem of initiation, which it often is. And in this case, I throw out the question of, hey, how does sex start to these people? Now, I've got to say, most people have a hard time answering this question because they haven't thought about it. They really don't think about it in
That
those
is a good
And
question.
it's supposed to happen naturally.
Yes, somehow.
No
work.
true.
Like it did the first, what is it, year and a half?
Exactly. So they go back to what it used to be, and it just worked before.
And I bet there's so much misinterpretation around that. Like, you think there's a problem in their relationship.
Yes.
And, things can, like you said, they came both feeling, you felt like there was a little bit of anger or resentment.
And they turn, it often becomes a problem of desire. The higher desire partner, male or female, will often say, it's because the lower desire partner is the problem. They come with blame. They blame the other person and say, I want sex, I'm missing out on sex. I really want more sex, and I'm not getting it, and it must be their fault.
And just to clarify, we're not talking about the extremes like a sexless marriage. We're just talking about the desire is just off caliber.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Often they're not too far apart, and it's a really good point. Often we're not that far apart, and that you find the lower desire partner, even though they're being called the lower desire partner, they might have desire. They just don't know how to they don't know how to move into their erotic brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is your biggest finding from the study?
So let me just tell you about John and Jane. I
yes.
haven't got there yet.
Right.
I just want to
Sorry,
make
John.
sure.
Okay.
I want to because they're a good example, and I'm going to bring them
I'm
up
so
later.
excited.
Yeah. I know. You're never very patient.
50,000,
Yeah.
incredible results.
So so I asked them this question: how do you start sex? And they were stumped, like most people are. And he finally stepped up and said, well, I think it's kissing. That's how you're supposed to start sex, right? And I said, well, yeah, for some people, that's one way of starting sex. And do you like kissing? And he went, oh, I love to kiss. And you could just see he just got his longing for connection. He described a feeling of connection he got from this. And you could just see him moving into his erotic brain. That's where he went.
I love that. And I love that because I can relate it to your previous research. Like, I can see, that's what's so great about your research. I can see where that's coming from too, now that I'm more familiar. This new one I'm not, but that's like, okay, that's him.
Yeah, and so I was excited that, okay, we've got there with him. He is fully engaged in and coming up with his own desires. So I turned to the other side of the couch, a big smile's on our faces, and I turn over to the other side of the couch, and there's Jane. Now, Jane has a very different mood on the other side of the couch. There is something very different going on. And so I asked her, what do you find, what do you think about kissing? And she said, eh. I'm like, okay. It was sort of a little bit of disdain.
A little off.
A little bit off. And I said, so what works for you to move into your, I didn't use those words at the time, but what do you feel to get turned on? And she said, I don't know. I get this a lot. I don't know. So we probed a little bit.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know because they haven't been asked this question. So hopefully people out there are actually thinking about this question.
I think for us it's been like 4 years of asking that question and we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. And I don't know if you ever figure it out.
I know unloading the dishwasher is in there somewhere. Clean kitchen is in there somewhere.
To each their own.
Not watching it, just having it done.
I see it. Yes, I agree
helps
with
me
you.
get out of that brain.
Out of your head. Out of that everyday brain.
That's a huge disconnect.
Yes. Yeah. So Jane finally came up with, when I asked her the question, when did it work last? So that's one way you can get it, is when did it last work for you? And she thought about it and she said, but one day he pushed me against the wall. He took charge and I could just let go. And now she's moving into her erotic brain. And there we go. And now I've got both of them. And it was this inspiration of knowing that everybody has a preference and an ongoing preference. They know it.
Yes.
When you get to it, they know it. And I wanted to understand what that preference was.
Yeah, like how to tap into it and know it.
Right. So
and it takes the blame away too.
It
creates
really
more
does.
understanding.
It really does. Yeah.
So what are your key findings then?
So I have to tell you a little bit that I started out asking only a few hundred people about this, about what turns you on.
Sorry, just to intercede, who's we?
Thank you for clarifying. I often use the we as to bring all the people, anybody who contributed. So my statistics person, my mentor, and actually some of the people here who tested out my questionnaire many times.
We've put
Yeah.
a lot of women through your
Yeah.
earlier questionnaires. But they form, I'm being completely full of gratitude because you really have changed so many of the women that we know, so many of their lives, and it's given us tools to communicate around sexuality with that early research. It's really done a lot.
I think the biggest breakthrough for me and my husband was just knowing that our preferences were different, what turns us on is different, and then like when we find out that we're different and it's okay
and that is really one of the very satisfying parts of seeing these couples in front of me but I will get to the findings first, so before we get there.
Yes, you
so
tell.
excited.
It's my first time hearing it, so I'm super excited.
So I'm just going to run through what happened. So there were you guys helped out writing the questions. At first we went through a stage of asking, first of all, some people want to know how the research is done, and it's really, I write something online and I ask people to contribute to research online, and at first I got about 200 responses and took just an open-ended question: what turns you on when you're having sex with your when you want to have sex with your partner, or your partner wants it with you? How would you best get turned on? I got lots of answers and formed 66 individual items. So there's 66 ways that we could discern what were really popular and what turns people on. And then reworded them with your help, thank you very much, and went out to a bigger audience. Now, I have to say, this has been extremely popular, and it's been more popular, I think, than most research. People want to tell you what happens in initiation.
Where else do you
anonymous
find that?
too, right?
It's
It's anonymous, and how do you find that information? I mean, people love, this is more science-based, but people love their horoscope. They love to learn about them.
Yes.
We're such a foreign.
Yes.
We're so foreign to ourselves.
Yes, especially
And then
around
sexuality, which
initiation,
is
turn on.
yeah.
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 So over a period of 2 years, I got over 10,000 people responding to my questionnaires. So this piece of research has 10,000 participants, which I was
Wow.
very happy.
That's
to get.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we have a lot of data now on what lights people up, what lights up their erotic brain when they're with a partner in an initiation setting.
Ah. And so, what is it? What would be the top few handful?
So to answer your question, the top finding in this was really, it's actually less important to know which ones were popular overall as to what happened to those 66 items. The 66 items ended up falling into 4 categories. So there's really 4 ways, and that's the biggest finding here, is that people found that almost everybody fit into one of these 4 categories. So sexual initiation turn on, instead of being incredibly simplistic like men like this and women like this, or really complex like 66 items, we now can talk about it in terms of 4. So there's 4 ways.
Again, Petra's making it relatable, taking from the academics to us everyday folks.
So what are the 4 ways?
The 4 ways. Yes, the 4 ways. The 4 ways are, I'm going to run through them first and then go into more detail of them.
Yeah,
that works.
yeah.
So they're the sensual,
Okay.
the sentimental, the sexotic, and surrender.
They all sound good to me.
They're all S's. That was a coincidence.
4 sexy S's.
Yes. So the first one, I start by describing that in terms of the body. This is the most
first one is
sensualist.
the sensual.
That's me.
Sensual is about the body. These people, remember, this is not what you like. It's what your brain recognizes as erotic. It says, that's what's sexy. That's what's going to turn on all of these processes to make me feel sexual. So this first one is about the physical body. We've narrowed it down to proximity. So that sounds a little bit weird, but it's when somebody gets close to you physically, either through touch, smell, or taste. It's sensual in nature. It's about being close to the body and having the body stimulated and stimulating the body.
That sounds good.
It tends to be slower.
Okay.
And it can be very intense.
I mean, I see that in a lot of new relationships, for sure. Would that
might be
correct?
part of what's in the new relationship, but we're going to continue on and go through them, and you can see how that might play out.
Yeah.
So the sensual is about the body and the touch, and now I tend to describe it as moving up the body into the emotions. The second one is called sentimental, and that is because it is about what's happening between 2 people. What is that? But not just the emotional connection. It's really about what defines a couple as a couple. So the romantic, sentimental aspects. You're special to me. I love you. Those kind of intense eye gazing, and very
like
sensual,
no one can
slow
replace
kissing.
you?
Yes.
That sounds like me too.
Yeah, no, that's like the universe is pulling you together.
Exactly.
Something
It's really about the 2 of you and what's happening, being needed, being loved, those kind of feelings. Now remember John in our example of how he was, he fit into this category. In retrospect, I was able to go back and realize this is what he was about.
They were married 7 years, you said?
Yeah.
And he still wanted long, passionate kisses.
That's how his brain recognized sensuality, sexuality. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So and so that's the second type. The third type is now moving firmly up the body, past the emotions, firmly into the head.
Mhm.
These people, whereas the first two feel sex, this one thinks sex. They're thinking.
This is sexotic?
Sexotic, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sexotic is called that because it's exotic, meaning a lot of the concepts they want to think about are newness, taboo, seduction. This type is, or I call it a type, but this erotic trigger or light switch to the erotic brain is really about that when somebody sees something new or seductive outside of themselves. That is, so these people, this is the hardest one to describe because it's more conceptual in nature, and it really is about so the behaviors attached to it would be dirty talking, talking dirty, role play, acting out what's the fantasy, the image in your
playful.
head. It's very playful. It's very playful.
Yeah.
And the one aspect I want to really highlight about this is that it's not only those things, it's also active. We used to call this one behaviorist because it was really associated with activities.
I remember that, yeah.
Activities were what lit this person up, but it's more of what the mind thinks these activities are. It is very active. And I highlight that because the next one, surrender, is about the same ideas conceptually, but they are not active. They are passive. And passive it seems a negative word here. It's not. It's letting go of thoughts.
I don't mind that.
Letting go
Yes,
surrendering into the activity, not thinking, just being in that. Now remember Jane fit in. She wanted to be pushed against the wall and taken and let go of her thoughts and just disappear into them.
Yeah, just let someone else lead.
Exactly.
Oh,
amazing.
That's me too. Okay, Petra, I've got 3 out of the 4. Is it possible, or do I lead with one more of the other? Like,
so that's a really good question, and it is. There is. Everybody has all 4 switches in them. So if we think of how our brain lights up, we all have them.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's the way you're describing it, but they all sound really hard.
They're all important, and they all are. And some are just brighter than others. Some light up their erotic brain faster than others.
And do we change, or are these consistent?
That's also a good question. That's the topic of my next research.
Oh, okay. So stay tuned.
we would be good research studies because the 4 years of our sexual awakening journey, I'm sure we've changed.
Well, and we've also been
grown
married
so
for over 20 years, or with the
20,
same man.
Yes, 28 years.
So we're certainly,
Yes. So what we found though is that people really gravitate towards one or another, at least in their current relationship, in their current situation. They know what works for them. Now, again, we as sex therapists want to encourage everybody to include all 4 of them. That's the best case scenario, is if the more you go into it, the earlier you start this, when you start this and you're struggling with sexual initiation, or you're struggling stepping into your erotic brain, the more you do this, as you say, the more easy it is to go to the other ones.
And the other thing too that's great about your research is it isn't even going into them, but understanding it. So understanding where your partner may be, or where you are, so that you're more forgiving to yourself or to people around you, so that you don't create false stories that may be completely unrelated. It's just how we're made up.
Exactly.
Yes. Beautiful.
Is this similar to the love languages? I'm just curious.
Yes.
You know, the five love languages?
Yeah, and so I love the love languages. They really say something specific, which is the love languages are about how I feel, or how we feel cared for and loved, right? It's a very specific feeling. We tend to get a sense of it. It's a wonderful language. The 5 love languages has offered many people the opportunity to talk about what makes them feel loved and cared for. Now, if you remember, there's only one of those 4 switches that actually pertains to love, and that was the second one, the sentimental.
Sentimental.
Exactly. So we, the lighting up the erotic brain is a different part of the brain. It's feeling sexual includes, and one of the biggest distinctions is excitement. So if you'll notice, all three of the other ones are more about think about turn on. That requires up energy, excitement energy. Moving, we have to excite our genitals,
Requires
not like
energy.
So we have to have energy, and that's usually excitement. So that's a different part of the brain.
Because the love language, I guess, is a little more passive.
It is a little bit more
slower,
safer.
Yeah. But I guess I see the connection in the portion of where you understand. You understand yourself better, and you understand your love better.
Exactly.
And so that creates, a little more forgiveness and understanding in the relationship.
Yes.
And deeper intimacy.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, TrufElle's, our movement mission is to ignite intimate, passionate relationships. So how would knowing this arousal type, understanding it, help people ignite that intimacy and passion in the relationship?
So it really is, this was done as a tool for communication. And just like the 5 love languages, it's a tool to communicate how you want something and how you feel turned on in this case. And feeling turned on is not talked about in regular life. We don't generally go, into schools or work and say, hey, what turns you on?
No.
We just don't talk about that.
I mean, we didn't even know that was a conversation up until probably you.
Yeah, it just opened up so many doors.
Yeah. So we have to get used to talking about this, and we don't talk about that initiation moment, that moment of when I'm in my everyday brain and my partner's in their erotic brain, what is going to work for me?
So how do we get each other into our erotic brain, knowing what we know from your study?
So what I've seen, and probably the biggest payoff for me as a sex therapist is to see when someone sees themselves in it. So I see a lot of people, as I said at the beginning, their desire, they blame desire. Oh, they're too, they don't have enough desire. And I can't, for example, ask the question of the first two, the sensual and the sentimental, what do you like sexually? How do you describe a feeling? There is no language to describe this. There is no language out there that says, so they say, I don't know, I guess I'm not sexual. When they hear themselves in one of these 4 ways, they often say, oh my gosh, I'm sexual after all. It's such a relief for them. It's such a relief for their partner. It stops the anger. And with John and Jane, for example, their anger, or his anger and her inadequacy, feeling of inadequacy, just disappeared, and they started having a different conversation.
Wow.
I know. I mean, imagine all the relationships it would.
You could save with this.
Just to understand that what's happening in the bedroom isn't a reflection of the health of your relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, I know sometimes it is, but when you're in a long-term relationship, it's really easy to blur those lines and blame it. Like, if we're not getting turned on in the bedroom, there must be something wrong with us.
Right.
And I bet you do with a lot of couples that have sexless relationships, right?
Yeah.
But knowing,
that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. But knowing with this information, you could actually help them. Because there's probably sexless due to these reasons, right?
Yes.
Well,
a relationship can
remember,
go sexless because there's resentment in the bedroom.
Yeah.
That's right.
And initiation is the gatekeeper of whether sex happens or not. So
I love how you're I love learning about your new research, and I love how it falls into the research that we were more familiar, which is your sex type. Because knowing your sex type and then knowing the initiation are just they're just and so insightful.
Yes.
So insightful.
So how do people know what their type is, Petra? Petra, do you have a study, a questionnaire online?
I have a questionnaire
Yeah. Oh yeah. Please
online.
share your the
'cause
questionnaire. Is it
I'm
open
sure
to the
people are
public?
dying to know.
Absolutely, it's open to the public. I'm still working on it. I'm working on it forever, probably.
So people can fill out the questionnaire
They
and
can
find
fill
out
it.
their
Yes,
initiation type
yes,
based on the current most
Yeah.
up-to-date research.
Yes.
Yes.
And in turn, you'll be helping Petra with this really, really valuable information.
Yes.
So how do they find it though? Yeah.
We'll share the link.
Yeah, we'll share
we'll
the
share
link.
the link
Yeah.
on
Okay.
TrufElle.
And if people wanted to find you, where would they find you?
And
They
we'll
wanted-
share that link as
We'll
well.
share
Well,
that
why
link
don't you
too.
share it now too? Are you on?
I'm now wondering which address to
Just
give.
one. Oh well, anyway. we'll share the-
Artofconnection.org.
Heartofconnection.org.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. Do you have any other questions, Lisa?
What's
I mean,
the
I know
future
we've got a
looking
million,
like
but-
for you? Like, where are you gonna go with this study?
Okay, so this dovetails a little bit with what you were asking earlier about how it changes between people, and is this consistent? Is this something that if you are turned on by pushing up the wall, getting pushed up against a wall today, are you going to be pushed
Is that
up?
your neighbor?
Are you going to feel same turn on if you're pushed up against the wall tomorrow or next week? No. And the answer is, well, we've done one study, which basically said we studied some people 1 month and then a month later and gave them exactly the same questionnaire. And they were, it was so consistent, it was a little bit scary how consistent it was. But that brought up another question. It does this also, over time it seems to be very short time, it's consistent. But what about between partners? Now I've heard a bunch of people say, well, what works for me, this partner doesn't work with another partner.
Oh, interesting.
We wouldn't
So-
know that.
No, we
In
wouldn't
the
know. We can't contribute too much to that one. Sorry. In another life.
And also at stage of relationship is it? We know that's different.
Yes.
Well, and I would think there's also the been there, done that type stuff too, right? Like there might be a playfulness, but it doesn't mean
Absolutely.
that's what you want your.
And we want to make
your
sure
sex
it
life to
does change. It does change throughout life, right?
Yeah.
So it changes, as you brought up earlier. It changes from.
I think that's done by a bee.
Oh no.
He left me.
Yikes.
You have a very brave face. Yeah, so it does change for people, depending. Do you want to go take the air?
No, it's okay. It's okay. But if I start to swell up, just know
Are
that's
you
what's-
allergic?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So
I just had sex with a bee, I guess. Not my stuff. I'm not that type. After all, been there, done that. Not my thing.
Now you've explored it.
yeah. So it seems like it's a never-ending study for you.
It's a never-ending study, and really, what lays over all of the research I do is what works from moving, because it changes also in the stage of sex. So, when you initiate, do you still want that same thing in order to stay aroused later on an hour later when you're having sex? Is it the same thing, or does it change when you have ready to have an orgasm? Because what we've noticed is what some people want to have an orgasm, they think about something quite different from what they started with. So depending on the stage of relationship, the stage of sex,
The
there's a
thinking brain.
lot of things that
What happens when the
might
thinking
shift.
brain's turned
Yeah.
off too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe your sex changes.
Exactly.
Your desire changes.
So, for example, we hear, and you might resonate with this. I don't think we've talked about this one. Is when you want to get over the edge to orgasm, some people go very internal and they stop focusing on their partner because they're thinking about something else that's more erotic to get them over that edge. So we know that fantasy might be quite different from reality, and that also might change. So it's an endless.
Fantasy is
it's an
another
endless
interesting.
amount.
Do we have enough time for a question about fantasy? Should
Kelly,
we
how
go
are you
there?
with time?
How are we with time?
I mean, I could talk to Petra forever.
I know. Yeah. We're good.
Oh, good.
So I'm curious about the difference between desire and fantasy, and how sometimes you fantasize about something, and when it comes true, it's just like, was that it?
It's a letdown.
Maybe it would have been better just to stay as a fantasy. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, as a sex therapist, I'm sure you must hear of hundreds of fantasies, and how does that play out?
Well, I gotta say, I ruin a lot of people's fantasies by just giving people permission to go ahead and do the things that they want to do, or we talk about the realities of those, but the reality is often different from the fantasy. So you, as a fantasy is wonderful because you get to create whatever reality you want to. In reality, you have to deal with. In reality, there's a different part of your brain that kicks in, which is the social part of the brain. Any partnered sex versus fantasy is going to be very different in that one is a very internal process and one requires you to use the social part of your brain. For some people, that social part of the brain can actually kill desire a little bit. You might be thinking about, what do I look like in front of this person? I got a bad smell.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of women talk about that.
Wow.
Yeah, worrying about. Well, the orgasm face was the big one.
Yeah.
Is my orgasm face horrific?
Oh.
And then all of a sudden, the woman loses their orgasm.
Yeah, there's no way we in French it's called le petit mort, which means the little death. You die a little bit when you have an orgasm. It's sort of a little bit, not literally. It means that you go inside yourself and you lose yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't lose yourself, like you're paying too much attention to what I look like, but you can't go inside and have your eyes roll back in your head and
turn into a zombie.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
And then the multiple, it'd be harder to have multiple
Absolutely.
orgasms if you're too concerned with how you look.
Yeah.
So one piece of advice I'd like to give is people who want to have different sexual experiences, push yourself past your orgasm. You're bringing that up. Do you just stop, or do you actually continue stimulating yourself? You might actually explore.
That's an
more of
option?
that.
Yeah, that's right. Like you just think, what else is there? You could push yourself past. Tell us more.
Well, next time you're masturbating, I want you to think after the orgasm, keep stimulating in a way that feels good. You don't have to, it's not with a partner, so you don't have to regulate how they're stimulating you because it's going to feel too harsh probably. We get a little bit more sensitive depending on who you are. Some people don't, but most people do get a little sensitive after that. So you have to lighten up and go and stimulate yourself the way that you want to.
That's a really good tip. Awesome. Wow, this has all been so fascinating.
I know.
And I'm so glad we're caught up now in your new study because we've had wonderful parties before based on your initial study and it blew everyone away. So we would love to have, after COVID, love to have more edu parties and have women get together and learn about their arousal initiation types. Would you be interested to come back?
I would love to.
Yeah,
And I must
please.
say
Yes.
that your help and patience with going through the endless questionnaires that I
Oh my gosh,
brought to you.
it's been torture, Petra. So much fun.
It's very helpful. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
Quite
gosh.
a journey to get to where we are today. And we owe
But
you.
painless.
Oh, so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, effortless.
And every time we talk to you, we're just
blown.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
Well, you know this so well. You know everything inside and out.
Yeah.
We'll circle with ideas like, what about this and that, and you kind of come as
You
like,
validate
oh yeah, I've
things.
already thought about that.
Yeah.
I've already researched it.
Yeah.
I already can tell you.
Not
about
everything, because you two.
Well, it feels
you've
like
brought
it.
a lot of ideas.
We
into
actually
this.
test it out for you.
Yeah, we
Yes.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
thank you.
welcome.
It's been
It's been a
amazing.
pleasure to be here.
And
And
we'll-
once again, congratulations on
Oh,
Yes.
well,
your published work.
Thank
Yes.
you. Cheers.
And a big hug if it weren't COVID.
Yes.
We'd be like, you too.
Well, this